Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty leagues, PPR leagues, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
What is going on, y'all? This is the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Austin, coming at you live again for another episode. We're just talking football, talking about everything football, fantasy related, of course. And, I'm just happy to be here on this Monday night. Obviously got a little bit of football action happening right now. Not too many touchdowns. It seems like the Eagles are doing their thing, coming out with a win over the Buccaneers. So that's great to see. Guys, we're going live at 7 p.m. Mountain Time every single day. We had some technical difficulties with the internet, so that is why we're going on at 8 p.m. right now instead of 7. But make sure you guys are tuning in right as we're going live, because I love to have you here. Love to hear any questions that you have for me. And, yeah, just appreciate all the people supporting the podcast and stuff. Yeah, it's really cool. And if y'all want to check out our Patreon, I'll be uploading some Patreon segments later tonight. Gonna do 2 segments over there, talk about some rookies and things of that nature, but you can check that out in our bio if you want to check out our Patreon. We are brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network, so very thankful to be a part of this project, and happy to be a host for you guys for this fantasy football stuff. I really love it. If you want to drop a tip or a donation, there is a moving little thing on the bottom of the screen, and that's where you can drop the tip or donation at streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network /tip. If you're feeling so generous on this Monday, you're up good on some parlays that you hit on Sunday. Not me, unfortunately, and that's okay. But guys, on Friday, I went 4 of 5 for my best bets, so that definitely, cushioned the losses. I was appreciative of the best bets coming in. If y'all want to check out my best bets that I had last week, you can watch the episode. Obviously, they have already happened now, but going on forward, on Fridays, I will be giving out my best bets of the week for Sunday. Obviously, throughout the week, for at least Thursday Night Football, I'll have a pick for y'all, something that, you might like, something I like. I spend a lot of time in the lab just looking at stuff, so I do think I am a trustworthy source when it comes to football, for sure. But definitely tune into Best Bets on Friday. That's definitely big. Let's get right into it, though. Following this hamstring bug that is plaguing everybody, plaguing every single NFL player right now. 26 players currently dealing with the hamstring injury right now. That is up from 24 last week, so I think it's only right that we just get a quick stretch in, just for the vibes. It just makes sense to keep those hamstrings stretched. If it can happen to the NFL players, it can happen to us too, guys. Quick stretch. Protect the hamstring at all cost. It is a must. But guys, we had a great NFL Sunday. I really like watching it. I watch Red Zone literally all day. My baby made some wings, and we were just munching on the couch watching the NFL. Not a better way to spend your Sunday, in my opinion. But let's get into segment 1 here. Segment 1, we're going to be talking about running back winners. And my first guy that I want to talk about today for winners at running back in week 3 of the NFL football thing is James Conner. James Conner, absolutely had himself a day against the Cowboys in a win where they upset the Cowboys. I think Cowboys were probably like minus 850, minus 1,000 on the money line or something, or at least they should have been in this game. And James Conner did not care about that one bit. Popped off 14 carries, 98 yards, and the touchdown. This is just a guy that I like in fantasy in general. I think he's probably one of the best running back 2 options that you could have grabbed at the beginning of the year, and he showed those signs all throughout last year and the year before, where he's just been that dominant workhorse in this offense. Seems like everybody else has their days where he doesn't show up, and this guy just shows up and proves himself every single day, getting the job done, and I absolutely love to see it. This is a guy that I don't think is afraid of the moment in any way. He goes out and grabs what he wants, and this dude literally whooped cancer, and now he's just whooping NFL linebackers in the hole. Nobody can take him down. Feels like his story is nowhere near over, and this might as well only be the beginning for this 28-year-old running back. Feel like he still has a lot of juice left, a lot of burst left in those legs as he gets through those holes very quickly. And he also runs as hard as anybody in the entire league, in my opinion. Currently in fantasy, he is ranked as running back 8 as of right now. Week 1 went for 12 fantasy points. Week 2, 16 fantasy points. And then week 3 popped off for 19.6 fantasy points. And in weeks 2 and 3, he had a touchdown in both outings. Something that we love to see. Obviously, Josh Dobbs is a little new to this offense, and he's going to need some players to make plays for him, or else it's just not going to work. Obviously, on Sunday, it worked really well against an amazing defense, the defense that people think is the best in the league, and James Conner kind of embarrassed them. He was running through all the holes, running all around the field. All the lanes were wide open for him, and he even scored the touchdown on the right side of the field. Looked really easy for him. Like I said, someone who's not afraid of the moment just goes and grabs what he wants, and he really showed that on Sunday. Looks like literally one of the best running back 2 options you could have at the moment, and someone as a potential trade target. If you check out our Patreon, guys, I'll be talking about some trade targets in just a little bit here when we post it, so definitely make sure to check out the Patreon. But James Conner absolutely won the week. Feel like his mental toughness is obviously unmatched probably by anybody in the league. Type of guy who can go through cancer and then come out on top. That is the type of guy I want to invest in. You know what I'm saying? It's a great story. Let's move to my second guy here. Talking about Kenneth Walker III. This dude's an absolute bowling ball in the field, and he picks up speed really, really well on offense. Obviously, the Seahawks had a really dominant win against the Panthers, and Kenneth Walker was a big part of that win with the 2 touchdowns out of Michigan State, second year, and he's only gotten better as he's continued to progress through his career. This week put up the 18 carries, 97 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that win versus the Panthers. Really big fantasy day too, with 30.6 fantasy points. Finished as running back 3 this week, so that's obviously a great showing from an explosive running back. He's just very explosive. There's really not much to say about it. This dude just doesn't really want to go down. He has the size, he has the speed, he has the agility, and he's really liable to break off a big run at any point in any game, just because of how quick he gets through the hole. You should literally watch his film. He just breaks through that hole, and his acceleration, he doesn't look like the type of guy that he would be that fast at that size, but he just drives his legs really, really hard and picks up speed really fast. And I know that linebackers, safeties, corners, anybody on the edge too does not want to tackle him. I know I would not want to tackle this guy when he gets rolling. Definitely someone to invest in fantasy, look for trades or something. I would love to have Kenneth Walker on my team. Also love the 18 touches that he got in this week. Also broke off a couple of receptions too, which is really not his MO, so we were happy to see that. Went for 3 receptions for 59 yards and had something pretty on the left side of the field from Geno Smith. Just fired one right in there for a big 30-yard gain. And, it's just something we're not really used to seeing from Kenneth Walker, so it was cool to see. Obviously, they were supposed to be bringing in Zach Charbonnet to be their pass-catching back. Walker said, nah, I can do that too. I'm that guy as well in the passing game. I did predict that last week this offense would be clicking, and it looked like they were really clicking this week 3. 37 points on the board and 442 yards of total offense, and a lot of that thanks to this guy Kenneth Walker, so definitely a winner in week 3. Next guy I want to talk about before we go to a quick break, and we'll be talking about losers after, is Zach Moss. it's kind of a struggle this week, guys. None of the relevant running backs really played well this week, and a lot of them just kind of put up an average day, and I can't really consider them winners. So we got to talk about a guy like Zach Moss, frowny face there, unfortunately, especially because I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner in both of my leagues, and I don't love this for Jonathan Taylor. Zach Moss actually absolutely popped off this week. Let's get the stats here. 30 carries for 122 yards, and then also added in 2 receptions for 23 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, us Jonathan Taylor managers are not going to be pleased with that in any way, because maybe they'll just start riding him until the wheels fall off. Week 2, he went up for 20.7 fantasy points against Houston, 18 carries for 88 yards on the touchdown, plus 4 receptions for 19 yards. So he also has some receiving prowess in his game. Seems like he's kind of doing it all. And then obviously week 3 came back with 22.5 fantasy points on 32 touches. That's a whole lot of touches. Definitely shows that they trust this guy to be, a weapon in their offense, and they're going to look to him and lean on him while Jonathan Taylor's not in there to make plays for them. He's definitely heating up, and I feel like the Colts will, just be riding him until the wheels fall off. Unfortunately for us, Jonathan Taylor fantasy managers, Colts run block grade was literally terrible this week, and Moss still found a way to put up 120 yards. So it's really just like him doing it all, and I can't see them going away from him just because they have a guy that's kind of sulking on the bench that hasn't shown anything this year, and they have a guy popping off at the moment. It's just interesting. He goes from 22 touches in week 2 to up to 32 touches in week 3. Numbers really don't lie, and the Colts just simply trust this guy to get the job done for them. When Jonathan Taylor comes back, we'll just see what happens, but I trust that Zach Moss is going to find a way to be a part of this offense until he shows that he can't. Come back with me afterwards, because we're going to be talking about my running back losers for week 3, and that will be right after this short break. What's going on, y'all? We're back. Let's hop up in here. Talking about my running back losers for the week. Guys who didn't really perform nearly as well as they should have. And to start, we're just going to start with the King Henry, Mr. Shove you 15 yards down the field with my stiff arm. He's been that guy for a very, very long time, and a lot of people were predicting him to not have that good of a fantasy year for the past couple of years. It's kind of been the talk and why he doesn't get picked in the top 5 picks, because he does have top 5 potential. The guy still squats well over 600 pounds and is probably the most talented running back in the league, but he definitely did not show that in week 3. Unfortunately, only went for 11 carries for 20 yards in this Week 3 matchup. Also added in 0 receptions for 0 yards on 0 targets. So that's definitely not going to get it done. King Henry has been held under 100 yards for the first 3 weeks of this season. I don't believe that's happened for a little bit in his career. He usually comes out strong and, asserts his dominance early in the season. Is this a cause for concern, or is this just a slow start for King Henry? We don't really know. It doesn't look like they have a lot of options in their offense besides Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, who had, a subpar day for the Tennessee Titans, but was still their best performer at wide receiver with like 48 yards. So when your best receiver is getting 48 yards, it's just not, you're not going to win a lot of games that way. And the Titans are seeing that for sure. Obviously coming off a great win against the Chargers in Week 2. So maybe this is just a slow start for Derrick Henry. He looked a little better in that Chargers game, but not too much better. Got to be one of his worst games this week that I've ever heard of in his career. 11 carries for 20 yards for Derrick Henry. Like, you can at least get to like 50. Very surprising to me. He had been showing also in weeks 1 and 2 some receiving prowess where he was able to make some plays in the receiving game, and they didn't even target him one time in the entire game. Kind of surprising to me that you don't even want to run a screen to Henry and see if he can get an open space and make a move. But, 0 targets this week speaks for itself. Titans struggled really badly in this 27-3 loss to the Browns on Sunday. Henry only had the 20 yards, and then Tannehill only passed for 104 yards total. So, Tannehill passed for 104, Henry runs for 20, and I believe it was only 130 total yards of offense. I was counting, I think Tannehill or somebody else also ran for 6 yards total. So 130 total yards of offense, never going to get it done. That's really bad from the Titans, and we'll see if Derrick Henry can find a way to follow up this really bad performance with something better next week. But he's a loser in Week 3, unfortunately. Going to go to my next guy who had his best game of the year. He literally had his best game of the year, and he's still going to end up on the running back losers list, which is unfortunate to see from Mr. Najee Harris. 19 carries for 65 yards. Also added in 0 receptions for 0 yards too, just like Derrick Henry. Not really great in those PPR type leagues when your running back can't even get a couple looks at receptions. And this is a guy with sure hands, so I'm not sure why he can't. Obviously, Jalen Warren's hooping now, so that might factor into why he's not getting any touches in the receiving game. But, yeah, like I said, this was Najee's best game of the year, and it only led to 6.5 fantasy points. He's been doing, he went 5.3 in Week 1, 5.3 in Week 2, and then 6.5 in Week 3. So at least a bit of consistency from a, being bad perspective in fantasy. But this brother just looks real slow out there, and everybody sees it. Has no ability to break off a big run, and everything I'm seeing on Twitter is literally just Najee Harris so slow. Najee Harris runs a 5.40. Get this guy out of the league. Car salesman, all of this type of stuff from Najee Harris. And personally, I love the idea of trading him in your fantasy league if at all possible. I'm sure not a lot of people in your fantasy league are going to be looking for a Najee Harris trade right now, but maybe somebody trying to buy low, or you could package him in a deal with another guy. But I would want him off my team as quick as humanly possible if I was a manager of Najee Harris. Doubt he'll really be doing much this year based on the first 3 weeks of performance not very good, and had his best game and got 19 carries and only turned it into 6.5 fantasy points. Goodness gracious. Jalen Warren has obviously been working into his workload, and for good reason, because he seems like a running back with some burst and with some agility, someone who can actually make a play on the football field. Unlike Najee right now, he has outscored Najee in all 3 weeks of football so far, and getting less production too, less touches. Guy looks strong, plus has the ability to actually make long runs, and the receiving upside is there as well. I do think Najee might be washed at the moment, and definitely am looking to move him in any league that I would have him in and I never invested in the first place. So praise God. Last running back loser that I really want to talk about today is going to be Josh Kelly. Josh Kelly had a perfect opportunity to show that, he was a lead back in this league, or someone who could at least be considered, someone who could get paid. And in this week 3 matchup, he did not do that. He did not do that at all. He went for 2.7 fantasy points, in week 3, which is just terrible. They were going up against a pretty bad defense in the Vikings, and he was able to touch it multiple times and just couldn't come up with anything in the rushing game, which is, tough to see. He did turn in an impressive performance in week 1 with the 16 carries for 91 yards on the touchdown, but since Eckler's been out, it's been a much different story. Week 2 only puts up 3.9 fantasy points. Week 3, 2.7 fantasy points. So definitely not going to get it done. These definitely were the games to show that he could be that guy for a team, whether it was going to be the Chargers or not. Kind of play for that contract money that running backs already don't get, and it's very thin, and he's kind of blown that opportunity as of now. Going forward, week 2, 13 carries for 39 yards, and then in week 3, 11 carries for 12 yards. This guy is cold, but he's cold in the bad way. He's not cold in the good way. He's freezing cold, actually. And he's currently, even if Eckler's out, someone I would be leaving on my bench in case another opportunity comes where he can reprove himself. And, Eckler's going to sit another game. Maybe then you could, give him another look. But for right now, I am not looking at Joshua Kelly at all to make any moves. But if Eckler doesn't come back and you're in a real bad spot where you don't have another guy who's going to get the amount of touches that he gets, I think he just gets diminished to a bad flex play until he shows otherwise, because he's not doing anything on the field at the moment. Doesn't really catch any balls either. All 3 of my running back losers, not getting any play in the receiving area, so that's unfortunate. But if you have to start him and he's going to start, Eckler's not playing, you just close your eyes, start him, and hope that he doesn't do what he did in weeks 2 and 3. And obviously he's shown in week 1 that he can get it done in some days, and he doesn't want to show up on other days. But I would definitely try to get rid of this guy too if we're talking trades. Absolutely get rid of him. We're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about my winners at wide receiver, and then obviously we got to talk about the losers too. So definitely come back with me. What is good? We are back talking about wide receiver winners for week 3 of the fantasy football season. Make sure y'all are liking and subscribing if you're liking the content. We absolutely appreciate any support that we get on the channel, and that definitely helps us grow. But let's talk right now about Davante Adams, who was literally everything for the Raiders yesterday. This man was hooping. He was all over the field, and nobody can contain him in zone situations, one-on-one situations, whatever it may be. Davante Adams was absolutely eating, had game highs in every category, 13 receptions, 172 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also added 20 targets, so obviously Jimmy was looking for him a little bit. With the 20 targets, put up 42.2 fantasy points in this appearance, and it was absolutely dominant. 30-year-old receiver still showing that he is pretty much untouchable in one-on-one situations. You got to send 2 if you want to beat this guy, and he hauled in like 5 or 6 receptions literally in the first quarter. It was very impressive watching Davante Adams get down yesterday, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. In the Raiders camp, he was beating corners and safeties on the short ball. He was beating them on the medium routes and on the deep ball, where he scored his first touchdown, which was a beautiful throw from Garoppolo, and that we didn't see too many beautiful throws after that or beautiful decisions. And Davante Adams was noticeably fed up. He kind of alluded to some trade talks yesterday after the loss. In his little post-game interview with the media, he was kind of saying, I don't have time to wait around for these guys. We did that last year. And 30-year-old Davante Adams, obviously, he's not going to be playing forever. I'm sure he wants to win more games, get more accolades, all of those things. And it's probably just not going to be happening in this Raiders offense. So that's unfortunate to see. He's currently ranked wide receiver number 4 in fantasy, and I really expect the Raiders and Jimmy Garoppolo, as long as he's on the team, to keep force-feeding Davante Adams targets, because really, where else are they going to go? We really haven't seen any other Raider, besides, I guess, Jacoby Myers a little bit, put up any good performances. Josh Jacobs is nowhere to be found, really, in the rushing game either. No touchdowns through week 3, and someone who was popping off, obviously, last year, was sitting down during training camp, waiting on that contract, and maybe wasn't doing enough work or conditioning or whatever, because he's not up to par at the moment, and you hate to see it for sure. But why should a guy like Davante Adams sit there and wait around for his team to start playing when he's carrying the entire load of the offense? If he was on another team, any other team, he would be making the same impact that he is right now. And especially if he was on a winner, like imagine a guy like Davante Adams on like the 49ers or something. They just give up one of their first round picks, because you can pretty much get a guy for absolutely dirt cheap in the NFL. It doesn't matter the talent, you just throw a first round pick and you get him. Imagine him in a 49ers type offense, or like a Chargers, now that Mike Williams just went down and him and Herbert were able to connect. That would be absolutely scary. So the Raiders better figure it out very soon, or they're going to have a disgruntled Davante Adams, trying to leave, trying to get out the door and go to a team that will actually try to win some games, because the Raiders are definitely not it. They're probably a little better than the Broncos, but that doesn't really mean a lot at all, unfortunately. Love me some Davante Adams. That dude's a dog. Let's talk about Keenan Allen, too. This guy was wide receiver number 1 in fantasy this week, and for good reason. How about another 20-target guy? Davante Adams and Keenan Allen both racking up 20 targets in their respective games. Keenan finished the game with 18 receptions, 18 of 20. That's good. 18 receptions, video game numbers, and 215 yards. Led to a soft and easy 45.6 fantasy points in week 3, so that's definitely good for all Keenan Allen managers. I don't know if I'm ready to trade him at all yet, just because the value is there. He's popping off with top 5 wide receiver explosions pretty much every week right now, and just ride that hot hand, because Mike Williams just went out. It makes a lot of sense that him and Herbert are going to have to pick up the load in that Chargers offense. This dude also threw for a touchdown. Before Mike Williams got injured, they ran a little wide receiver pass, little pitch action, and then he threw it downfield for a touchdown to Mike Williams for like 50 yards. And then Mike Williams ended up tearing his ACL later in the game, which is unfortunate to see. Hope to see a speedy recovery from Mike and that he gets better. But obviously, there is more work to do for this Chargers offense, and it seems like Keenan Allen's going to be the number 1 guy moving forward. Obviously, Eckler's sitting out as well. So, like I said, him and Herbert are going to have a task on their hand to, keep this Chargers on the winning side of the field, winning side of the ball, winning side of the league. It's going to be hard for them, obviously, with the lack of defense that they currently have. And they're going to need to put up a lot of points, so expect more volume for Keenan Allen. He's currently ranked as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy right now, 31.1 fantasy point performance in week 1 or in week 2, and followed it up with 45 in the week 3. This dude's 31 years old, playing at an extremely high level, and there's just a lot of upside with him. He runs very crisp routes and, doesn't try to, do too much on offense. Love to see it. He's definitely relying right now on, some short routes plus yards after catch, and then he'll, dive a little bit deeper into those medium routes where he's just, trying to sit down and be a target for Justin Herbert. He's got that route running savvy and the experience that a lot of these young receivers don't have, so that is really his advantage. And look how good looking this dude is. That's probably why they're just letting him have the ball. They're like, bro, just have it. It's all good. Obviously with these 2 stars off of their team, 2 guys with at least superstar X Factor abilities in Madden, and Eckler and Williams being down, we'll see if Herbert and Allen can actually handle that whole load. Obviously, Josh Kelly showing that he can't perform too well, and they take on the Raiders next week, who, defense kind of look like Swiss cheese, and I kind of expect a pretty big game from Keenan Williams come week 4. Last guy we're going to talk about in this segment, and then take a quick break. Oh no, we got two more guys, because we're going to talk about a big, strong guy for my 4th guy. But for this one, this dude, Mr. Consistent, Amon-Ra St. Brown, in week 3, popped off again. And when does he not pop off? He's just a constant bucket getter. 9 receptions for 102 yards on 12 targets in the decisive win versus the Falcons. He also carried the ball one time for 4 yards, so love to see that they're trying to mix in any way to get the ball to this guy, because he's very electric and very fast. He's just too solid. He runs every single route on the field, and he runs it well. He'll run the drag. He'll sit down for that short route and try to make the guy miss one-on-one, and he is one of the most dangerous deep threats in the entire league at the moment. This guy has very sure hands, elite speed and acceleration. He just gets away from guys very easily, and he's very sneaky strong. You kind of see he's got the arms if you look closely. Very strong guy, can rip the ball away from these DBs, and very strong in the legs too, where he's just obviously faster and has more acceleration than the DBs too, to run away from them and just be savvy on his routes. He's currently ranking as wide receiver 9 right now in fantasy football, and his workload is, it feels like his workload is if he wants it, he just gets it. Practically guaranteed fantasy production every single game that he's out there, barring any injury. He was dealing with the injury coming into the game, but he was just whatever, I'll just play, and I'll just be the best player on the field too. So how about that? He's obviously the Lions' best player and the best playmaker. So in those big situations, they're going to be looking at Amon-Ra to make plays, probably solidifying himself currently as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver and top 10 wide receiver in general in the entire league. Very, very quickly too, in a very explosive offense. And he was an absolute winner this week. Led his team to another victory against, a pretty tough Falcons defense. Had a couple good corners that he was going up against, in AJ Terrell and Jeff Okudah, who was also his former teammate. So he probably knew his moves or whatever, and he still couldn't stop him. It was very cool to see. If y'all haven't seen a picture of Amon-Ra's dad and where he comes from, I would go ahead and look that up immediately. Just look up Amon-Ra St. Brown's dad. That dude is an absolute unit. And then we'll move to my last guy real quick, and then we'll take a small break. Talk about a big, strong guy in DK Metcalf. Another unit just like Amon-Ra St. Brown's dad. Put up 17.2 fantasy points in his week 3 outing versus the Panthers, a 37-27 win. It was great to see. Finished with 6 receptions for 112 yards. And I did predict that DK and the Panthers offense were going to have a nice day on Sunday, and it actually happened. Go me. Love to see that. Some good predictions coming in just because I'm in the lab constantly, guys. Listen to my picks. They're very sharp all the time. Never lost, undefeated, never lost. But just like I said, DK boxed out all the Panthers DBs real well. Just just exactly how I predicted it. It was just too easy. It was hard for them to take him down. He was running a lot of good routes. He would get the medium gains, short gains, and when they're coming to the sideline to try to tackle him after he caught the ball and trying to get him out of bounds, tackle him. It was just not easy for them. He's a big body, and he was asserting his dominance on the field, which was great. DK was definitely the favorite target in this game with the 8 targets. Nobody else really coming close, even Lockett. He did not get in the end zone this week, but even with the rib injury that he was sustaining throughout the week, still found a way to assert himself and still was doing really good on the field. As dominant of a force as there is in the NFL, I would continue to invest in DK Metcalf as long as he's healthy. He seems like he's good to go. He also faces the New York Giants next week, who are just terrible, barring any injury. I see DK having an absolute field day in week 4. I believe that in 8 times in his career, or maybe in 9 times in his career, after Sunday, he's had 100-yard games. Probably going to pop off for another one, and other people definitely think so as well. Make sure you're giving a look to DK Metcalf in those DFS type leagues, or even weekly fantasy sports, what have you, stuff like that. DK Metcalf is definitely a good guy to be investing in. When I come back, we're going to be talking about my final segment, the wide receiver losers of week 3. So make sure you're coming back with me so we can talk about that. Friends and neighbors, we are back again talking about wide receiver losers for this fantasy week 3 that has passed us by now that these games are ending. I don't think the final game is over yet, but it is coming to a close, and it doesn't look like too exciting of a game, unfortunately, in a fantasy perspective. So make sure you're just tuning in with me, because I'm just giving you my wide receiver losers, guy that you should probably be staying away from in your fantasy football leagues. And I unfortunately have this guy and can't find a place to get rid of him and unload him. And I don't know if I should just rock with him or not, but he was absolutely a loser in week 3. If you don't know, this is Garrett Wilson. Finished with 9.8 fantasy points in his week 3 matchup. And he's officially in an unfortunate fantasy spot. And I hate to see it myself. Week 3, 5 receptions for 48 yards. Did have the 9 targets, so at least they were trying to get him the ball. But, Zach Wilson just hasn't been that guy for them. He's obviously still the most targeted wide receiver on the Jets. But Zach Wilson hasn't even come close to eclipsing 200 yards in this season. In his 3 games of work, he has gone for 140 yards in week 1, 170 yards in week 2, which was like a little better, which is kind of great for Zach Wilson, 170 yards. And then this week only put up 158 yards. It's just an unfortunate situation for Garrett Wilson. The volume just doesn't kind of seem to be there unless he finds a way to make like a big home run type play, which wasn't the case this week. And obviously, if the DBs are doing their job, he can't do that every week, even as big of a talent that he is. It seems to be really a Zach Wilson problem, and I don't really know what to do now. Only 2 receptions last week. Did have the 69-yard bomb that he caught, but only on 2 receptions, plus only 48 yards this week, which is absolutely awful and not looking too good for 2022's Offensive Rookie of the Year and his future is definitely in the balance right now with Zach Wilson being his quarterback. It is not fun for Garrett Wilson managers. Maybe look to trade him. Maybe we're trying to sell him off too soon. But his quarterback situation is bad. Next loser from week 3, and we got to talk about him because he's been performing so well. I don't really want to put him on the losers list after one bad week. But, maybe other weapons are looking a lot better in this Texans offense, especially a guy that I'm going to talk about a little in a second is Tank Dell. But after Nico Collins' big performances in week 1 and 2, week 1 went for 14 fantasy points, which was obviously blowing everybody's projections out of the water. He went for 6 receptions, 80 yards on 11 targets, so we love to see the targets there. Week 2, 27.6 fantasy points, 7 receptions for 146 yards on the touchdown. Got 9 targets that game. And then week 3, we were just gifted with a bust from Nico Collins, 2 receptions for 34 yards on only 3 targets, which was very, very weird because CJ Stroud had a pretty decent passing day himself. CJ Stroud went 20 for 30, 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you would expect Nico to be getting in on a little bit of that action. Texans also won convincingly. Let's go. It's about time Texans put a win on the board and against a divisional opponent. I was very happy watching that game. But where was Nico Collins at? Seems like he kind of fell victim to the game script. A lot of people say that. And I guess it just wasn't the game script for Nico. The Texans were pounding the ball as they were trying to, control the rock and win the game, which we don't do very often. They ran the ball 26 times, and Stroud only threw the ball 30 times, where in the past 2 games, in weeks 1 and 2, Stroud was throwing like 45 times a game, so literally 15 less, and obviously that meant less work for Nico. And then also we have to remember that Tank Dell was, activated this game. This man was popping off, going crazy, put up the 5 receptions for 145 yards and the touchdown, had one really long run where he was looking explosive and fast and twitchy, all that stuff. Tank Dell should have also had 2 touchdowns. He had one deep bomb that he caught like right at the 1, and he just wasn't able to will himself into the end zone. But the kid is definitely fast and electric, so look out for Tank Dell, and then watch out for Nico Collins. We'll see if he gets some more work in the next week. Definitely not ready to give up on him in any way, but just thought that he lost in week 3. Last guy I believe that we'll be going over in this episode of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, like and subscribe, all those things, is Jahan Dotson. Dotson, 4.1 fantasy points in week 3. Definitely no good. Another sad performance for Jahan Dotson, someone that we were expecting, and I feel like all the fantasy football gurus were expecting to have a big, big year for his team. Put up a measly 4.1 fantasy points in week 3. He is currently ranked as the 72nd wide receiver in ESPN fantasy leagues. So, not someone that is, looking good in his offense. Dotson did see his targets diminish in week 3 only to 4. He only got 4 targets in the week 3 loss versus the Bills. Obviously, they were getting stomped on by Josh Allen in that offense. Diggs, all those people were making a lot of plays on the other side of the ball, and Sam Howell just couldn't find a way to, get it to really any of his playmakers. But Dotson being the specific loser that we are looking at, and in week 1 he showed a bit of promise, just a bit of promise, with the 5 receptions for 40 yards. He got 7 targets that game, so we were like, maybe just a slow week for him. But in week 2, came back, 3 receptions, 22 yards on 5 targets, and now we're like, gosh, what's this guy doing? Is he gonna ever do anything for my team? And then week 3 comes, 2 receptions, 21 yards on 4 targets, so literally just dropping in every single statistic. And it looks like he's kind of being a forgot about piece of this offense, this Eric Bieniemy offense that's supposed to be, really explosive with a great offensive coordinator like him. And it just seems like their offense doesn't know, I guess its identity receiving wise yet. Curtis Samuel is currently leading the entire team in receiving yards, which is kind of weird to see that it's not McLaurin. It is very close, but Samuel is the leader currently. And Dotson has led the team in targets so far, though, which is a decent sign for fantasy managers if there is any good signs in this Commanders offense. And in Jahan Dotson, he is tied for the lead with Terry McLaurin with 16 targets total in those first 3 weeks. So not too bad, but definitely struggling on that side. He might need some extra time with Sam Howell to kind of work those kinks out and iron those things out from a receiving perspective. Maybe they just didn't get enough work in the offseason, because this is definitely a talented guy. And he showed us last year, was it Heineke that it was his quarterback or somebody, but he was catching touchdowns left and right, and that's just not happening this year. So watch out for this guy. He might be someone you got to move to the bench, someone that you can't play in your flex any longer, but I assume that he'll find a way to, do something this year. It's not like he's just going to do absolutely nothing. Still someone that I may look at as a flex potential if you don't have a better guy, but he's extra cold right now, and we don't love to see it. Guys, that is going to wrap up the show today on this beautiful Monday, GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Sorry we came a little late, but I hope y'all still tuned in. If you're watching after, go ahead and check out the best bets from Friday, because, like I said, we went 4 for 5. That was a great little situation that we had. Make sure you're tuning in every single day, 7 p.m. to, hear more fantasy takes. Like I said, I'm in the lab daily, just crafting things up and, looking for ways to make y'all winners. That's what I'm trying to do at the end of the day. So, yeah, thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for sponsoring the podcast, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Peace.